Yeah, Governor. Minister, I just want to make a short contribution on this bill, and the issue I want to raise is the minimum wage section of the bill. As the Minister is missing, I believe, a key opportunity to raise the income levels for workers. The Government's handling of the minimum wage question around this year's budget was very disappointing. The total absence of information and the conflicting accounts about what you were going to do on the minimum wage from yourself, Minister, and from the Taoiseach was very unhelpful to workers. It was extremely regrettable that this Government decided to defer a decision on the minimum wage, citing Brexit as an excuse. This simply wasn't good enough, and that excuse didn't fool anybody. Thousands of workers looked to budget day to hopefully get a small break, and for many, the only thing they would have been expected to see is an increase in the minimum wage. To leave that out, and for the Minister for Finance to not even mention it in his budget speech, was insulting to low-pay workers, and is something that should never have happened and should never be repeated again. If the Government decided not to increase it, you should tell people on budget day, not leak it, then avoid it, then have conflicting accounts of the approach. This left people in limbo, not knowing if they were getting such a much needed increase in their wages. It was very unfair, and I'd asked the Minister to look at how this was handled. The Government's decision not to increase the national minimum wage in Budget 2020 was a slap in the face of the 137,000 workers who currently earn the national minimum wage. There will be no postponement of rising rents, no stop to the huge insurance costs, or no delay to the carbon tax, but it seems the Government don't actually care if people can afford this or not. The excuse of Brexit doesn't fool anyone, Minister. There are legal protections currently in place for those companies who can show they cannot afford to pay the national minimum wage. Brexit is not the issue here. A disregard for those on minimum wages is. The various wealthy workers in the country were, of course, rewarded in this budget with the extension of the Special Assignee Relief Programme, helping rich executives to pay less tax. This horrible tax scheme lets highly paid executives avoid hundreds of thousands of euros in tax. The contrast in your treatment of millionaire executives and that of minimum wage workers couldn't be more stark. Research from Social Justice Ireland shows that there are over 100,000 workers living in poverty here in 2019. OECD statistics show that Ireland has the third highest rate of low pay in the 36-member organisation, with 23% of the workforce here on low pay. The low pay economy here is totally unacceptable and is something that should be urgently addressed. I was glad to see the Government didn't oppose the Sinn Féin recent motion on the minimum wage and living wage here a few weeks ago. Your support, Minister, for our motion was much appreciated. The motion, as passed by the Dáil, condemned the Government's decision not to increase the national minimum wage and called for the living wage of €12.30 per hour to be introduced. I hope the Minister intends to follow the instructions of the Dáil, but to be honest, I won't hold my breath because you haven't done that in a lot of other issues. The Minister and I will disagree substantially on this point, but I will make it regardlessly. Sinn Féin don't accept that workers should be forced to wait year in year out for the Government to throw them a few crumbs from the table when they're dishing out the cash. And this year the Government didn't even manage to do that. This isn't any way to treat people. This isn't the way to treat low-paid workers. The minimum wage structure has failed in this state, and the Minister should at least acknowledge that. How could the minimum wage laws here be considered a success when 100,000 plus workers are living in poverty? Why does this Government think it's normal for workers to be living in poverty? Is that the kind of economy and society we want? I certainly don't. Some people will actually say yes, but the people I represent in the party I'm a member of totally reject this approach. We want an economy that works for people and for our society. Our current system is not delivering that for everybody. Sinn Féin have proposed a plan to introduce a living wage of €12.30 with appropriate supports in place for those businesses who may not be able to afford this change. Our plan would see an immediate move to the living wage, as it's unacceptable to keep kicking this can down the road. Who are we to tell workers on the minimum wage that they must wait longer to get paid a wage that they can get by on, a wage that they can live on and exist on? You're either for the living wage or you're not. And it's time political parties put the money where their mouth is and commit to delivering for low-paid workers. Our proposal for introducing a living wage includes an exemption for those financially vulnerable businesses who can show the Labour Court that they genuinely cannot afford this transition to the living wage. We don't believe this clause will be used widely, as most SMEs already value their workers and already pay their employees the living wage, and much more. In fact, a similar provision already currently exists for the minimum wage and has never once been used by any business. However, this exemption is important as it will safeguard businesses and jobs in those SMEs who genuinely find themselves in difficult financial circumstances. And we were clearly, when we were in our discussions about this, we wanted to make sure that no business was affected where they genuinely couldn't afford to pay at least in living wage to their employees. A Eurofund report from 2018 showed that implementing a living wage could play a significant role in offsetting the rise of in-work poverty across the European Union. Proper wages and the eradication of precarious work practices must be the essential foundation of economic growth and productivity. Sinn Féin wants Ireland to become the first country in the world to introduce a living wage on a legislative basis. So I would encourage the Minister to examine her own government's approach to low pay, recognise how regressive and unfair it is, and commit to introduce a living wage for workers.